want to say a big shout out to Meta for organising and curating spaces like this. It's really important to have spaces that are for connection and not just clout. And I think that's quite important within the community. So yeah, I'm excited to share some pieces and see what you guys think and get your feedback and everything. So this is a piece that I've written quite a while ago, and I feel like it's something that I don't often share because, I'm not sure about like how it'll be received in terms of audience, and also in terms of my own, it's sort of about my journey with spirituality and faith and how that's quite like meandering and things. So I'm from a Muslim background, and so I was raised quite religious, like practicing, but it's a bit of a journey. So anyway, this is called Stand Behind the Yellow. The waves crash against her, lapping up behind her skull. With her rudimentary skill, she puts this into words, or marks pen to paper, sculpting anguish, from flame to ash, from dust to clay, born and reborn, born from dust, born of the earth, settling into these walls, rooting oneself in the dirt, shivering mountains, her shoulders, weakened by the sun's rays, chiseling away at her spine, oceans of grey, swirling in swathes, beneath her blue-stitched nest, cupping hands together to hide blue mind, empty the contents of these tired eyes onto the page, which holds promise of carving out better days, crayon visions, canyons of thought dripping from the angered skies, stormy sunset, breeze, cool these veins aflame, calm these busying tides, hold tight to loose thread of peace, rare, roaring, candle yellow dream, paint applied to tarmac, drawing up lines to center the winding road, center you on your journey home, stand behind the yellow for your own safety, do not exceed bounds, do not climb the fence if warned, remain seated, feet on the ground, sunken head placed on sunken bones. Is this rope my salvation, a noose or a lifeline? My hands tremble, trying to hold on to this rope handed to me like everything else, handed on a plate with silverware, silver spoon comfort and guilt swallowed down like medicine sweetened by juice, like Allah Shafi Allah Kafi, before drinking cough syrup with anxious hands, clutching my mother's hands. Allah cures, Allah is sufficient. God cures, God is sufficient. The prayer will soothe the discomfort, incantation to proceed, calming seas, running down dry throat. Calming seas bring with it the serene. Divine waters will drench your soul clean. Divine waters while fist clenched mean. Divine waters a myth or mirage, sold by bearded men selling bearded dreams, lies wrapped in cloth, covered up to silence deep yearning for truth. Wrap cloth over aching head, keep your demons buried beneath these threads. Silence deep yearning, drink potions of old, throat burning, live motions of old, soul churning. Repeat actions passed down from generations, time turning. Wash body and bone, head to the ground, ask for forgiveness, do not exceed bounds, do not climb the fence if warned, do not look for meaning elsewhere untold, do not question the potions of old, do not speak of the waves crashing against you, seek safety in prayer and silence demons gnawing at your skull. From clay to dust, dirt to dirt, we rise like flames and fall like ash on tarmac. Cigarette butt smoke till filter finds you coughing up dark thoughts, spitting onto the dirt. Deep breathing, sigh, sip, and see sorrow awaits. Sorrow awaits. Heavy incantations under your breath, potions of old running down your throat, calming seas, waves crash against the inner walls, your throat, your chest, your skull, your beating flesh. Breeze, cool these veins aflame, calm these busying tides, hold tight to loose thread of peace, rare, roaring, candle yellow dream. Stand behind the yellow for your own safety. Just to give, I forgot to give the context. The line about is this rope my salvation? There's a line within the Quran, like scripture, which is the idea that faith is a rope, and you're supposed to hold tight to the rope. And the idea is that, you know, no matter what happens, you hold tight to the rope of God or the rope of prayer. And so the line about is this rope my salvation, a noose or a lifeline? I'm sort of playing with the idea of the rope, and my hands tremble trying to hold on to this rope handed to me like everything else, you know, handed on a plate. So the idea that, like, you know, it's harder to hold on to faith when it's something that you inherit, rather than you found it yourself. What does stand behind the yellow mean? Like when you're on the train and they're like stand behind the yellow line. I actually came, like, I was on the train, like, when I write a lot of my poetry on trains, so I was on the train, like, moving through platforms, and they were like stand behind the yellow. I was like, and they kept saying it, so I was thinking, like, that would be a good line to sort of come back to. Yeah, the safety line. It's like the whole idea of, and the whole piece builds upon that idea of bounds and boundaries and confinement and you know, what is within and what is, you know, outside of that.
What I really enjoyed while listening to you was I could envision your thoughts while you were writing, while you were putting it together. It's like it was your journey. You're talking about your family, the way you think of it, the way you perceive it, where it's come from, what's the challenges in terms of holding onto the rope. Like, it was interesting.
Oh, thanks, man. That means a lot. Yeah. As in, like, it's personal in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I think this is why I don't perform this piece, because it's very personal, and, like, I think I was also why I wanted to read this today was because I'm quite afraid of judgment related to this piece, because it's sort of a little bit, I felt that after I wrote it, it was a bit passive-aggressive, or some people might think it's blasphemous even, some of the way that I write about God and faith.
But I enjoyed listening to it.
No, I appreciate that. Especially, like, some conservative religious, like, spaces might not be as welcoming to this kind of piece, because some of the lines are very, like, you know, bearded men selling bearded dreams. Like, it's not subtle. It's like, I'm basically, like, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek kind of, you know.
Yeah, it was. But, I mean, again, I enjoyed it a lot. And another reason why I enjoyed it, and especially based on what you just said, is because a lot of the shit that I write, excuse my language, is very personal. And that's where the challenge comes from when you're going to perform it for a large audience, because you're then thinking, shit, they're going to see me. Can they see me? Can they hear me? Can they understand? Do they not understand? And it's like all of those thoughts popping through your mind. Yeah. So it's a bit scary.
I totally get you. Yeah, because it's like you're being vulnerable, right? And this piece is, for me and my journey with faith, that is something very vulnerable and very personal to me. And, like, because I've faced a lot of issues, like, you know, difficulty with family and things with faith, and, like, not conforming to, like, expectations that my parents have of me and my wider family have of me, you know, it's difficult. So, like, so a lot of this was also when I was writing this when I was in between wearing hijab and not wearing hijab. So this was a few years ago now, and which was only, like, 3-4 years ago, and I was in between, like, wearing the hijab, and then I was living away from my parents, so I was, like, wearing, like, a blue beanie a lot of the time. So I sort of transitioned from the hijab to a beanie to then taking off completely. But every time I'd go back to see my parents, I would have the whole hat on. I'd hide behind this blue stitched nest, is what I called it. The idea of, like, you know, like, I'm it's like a safety. It's literally, the hat for me was a safety, because most of my life I didn't show my hair, and so even that is a vulnerability in a way, right? So, yeah.
You're saying, like, be behind the yellow line, but it's also about boundaries. But there's a scope to it, because there's a lot of landscape imagery in there. Like even going as far as like the Great Ocean. I was wondering what the Great Ocean signifies. Like.
So, because a lot of my work is around mental health, and I've got like my sort of journey with mental health as well. So the idea that the line that you're referring to, the shivering mountains, her shoulders. The idea that like you're holding the weight of the world on your shoulders and weakened by the sun's rays, like it's just weakened, chiseling away. Oceans of grey swirling in swathes behind her blue stitched nest. It's kind of talking about depression. Like that's how I envisaged it. Like when you're depressed, your entire brain is just clouded with this unmoving grey. But it's almost like I'm hiding it under my hat. Like all the stuff that's going on in my head, it's the safety, right? It's the hat or it's the scarf, and that's why a lot of the imagery later is about lies wrapped in cloth, covered up to silence deep yearning for truth. Wrap cloth over aching head. Keep your demons buried beneath these threads, right? The idea that you could be wearing a hijab, but like you're still struggling with demons. Just because you're like wearing a symbol of faith doesn't mean that you're feeling spiritually like
protected.
Yeah, protected or like safe. Like you could be going through all sorts of stuff, and like that's why basically this piece is mainly like it's about like mental health and faith. Like my experience with when I'd started going through like depression and things, my family were like, oh, like you need to be praying more. Like this is a sign of lack of faith, that if you're praying and if you're like putting your faith in God and you're trusting God, you wouldn't be feeling this way, which is not the case. That's not how mental health works. But so I was sort of told pray, or read more scripture, or maybe drink this sort of water that's like been blessed, whatever, like different things. So I tried to really play on that of like, but also kind of play with the imagery of like religious imagery in terms of like waters that are sacred, but also like almost like magical or mythical like waters, like the idea of drink potions of old, like almost like it's like a witch type of like a ritual or a witch, sort of the line between religious like belief and like witchcraft, or like that kind of, and the idea of like the demons. It's like a lot of the sort of religious imagery, because there's like a lot of depictions of like mental illness, especially within South Asian communities, as being linked to like being possessed, or there's a devil inside you, there's a demon inside you, whatever. And the only way to like extinguish that demon is to pray, right? Or to drink this holy water, or just keep people praying over you, or whatever. Which is like, I do think that there's some power to prayer, etc. But during that time, I didn't find it, and I found it scared me more to feel like, oh, is there something wrong with me because I'm depressed? So that's kind of where this, where this came from.
I like how you repeat. There's a part where you repeat it again. So at the beginning, you talk about like clay, and you say dust to clay, and then you say it again later on. And you speak about coming up to the fence, or don't jump the fence if you're warned. I think I like how you're displaying sort of rebirth. And it's like, I feel like there's rebirth and death within it as well, because you're that whole dust to dust thing.
Definitely, yeah.
But yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, I tried to like, because that's also, it's weird because like when you grow up religious, like a lot of like religious stories, or like
I can relate to you massively.
Religious religious language. So like, and we come from the earth. We go back. We return to the earth. The idea of like clay, dust, clay to dust. But I also like having that like. I try to, my poems. I try to make it as like a circle. So like the beginning and the end usually like ties in together, and the idea of. But the difference was that dust to dust, clay to dust, dirt to dirt, we rise like flames and fall like ash on tarmac. I thought that was quite a good
And you speak about
cigarette butts, yeah, like. But then I sort of weaved it back into like you're coughing up these dark thoughts. You're smoking. You're trying to find this peace, this roaring candle yellow dream, this idea of peace. But instead you're smoking until filter, and you're like, just going through it. So, I use a lot of imagery, and you know this. Like that's my main like thing.
Yeah, it seems very layered. Like the line about ash on tarmac, just these layers of like dark, heavy, things like ash and tarmac just feels very like grungy and you know what I mean. So that's actually really cool. Like there's
a lot of grey actually.
Yeah,
There's a lot of grey, like smoke, ash, like all of these sort of dark, depressing images almost. But that depicts like the mental sort of turmoil of like struggling with faith and struggling with these things. And like it would be interesting if I maybe like wrote a separate. If I did find spirituality again, if I wrote like a separate piece, which is like from the other side, right? Like when I do find that piece, what would that look like? Because all the images would be like happier, right? Like, yeah.
Maybe what you're looking for.
Right. Yeah. And it's difficult, like, especially if like everyone that's close to you follows the same thing, and you feel like you can't or you don't fully relate. It's like, where do I fit then? Or will I be accepted? Do I belong? And that's something that I struggle with, like belonging. But like, weirdly, like I found that in other spaces, like going to punk gigs or whatever, right? Which I hadn't found. And it's weird, like you can feel a belonging in a space that you wouldn't expect to, compared to like your own community or like where you should feel good, right? But it just gives me like, I have respect for both types of communities, like Muslim and non-Muslim, but I understand the nuances, like I understand like it's difficult, like, yeah.
It seems like a journal. It seems like as we said earlier, it's very intimate. So it's almost like you're talking to a therapist or somebody, which is like
that's basically all my poetry is just
like,
depressing.
That's what we said earlier. Like when some artists they share like very personal stuff, but that's because I do it as well. That's because art for us is therapy.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
It becomes like spaces like this, or even bigger spaces, they become like a big therapy session.
No, definitely. It's like group
They
therapy.
help
But-
us to heal.
Like I've never read this piece to my parents, for instance.
yeah, there's pieces I can't read to my parents.
Yeah. And it's not like they might not even get it. It might go over their head, but it's the idea that I don't want to upset them, and so I prefer to keep it separate. Like.
Because these are your findings.
Yeah.
Like they've taught you, from what I'm relating to. Like our parents they've learned from their parents, and then they teach us. And we, I think, are a generation where we are breaking that sort of learned behaviour and unlearning all the things that we've been taught to kind of feel a little bit more in our skin. For me, I come from a Hindu background and totally within a religious home where it was weird because both my parents were quite Western, but because they had been taught so much, like you have to do this, they could never tell me why. But they would tell me that I had to do something, and eventually...
It's like if you don't have your own path to it, it's not as meaningful. If you're just doing things, and I found that that's why, like with the hijab especially, it came to a point where I felt like I was just not doing it for myself. I was doing it to appease others, and I was doing it to like please them and to conform. And I knew that was what they wanted to see of me, and so I did that. But it was just like a performance, and it felt like I was performing this role that didn't align with who I was, right?
Had no meaning for you.
Yeah, I didn't feel a connection to it. I didn't feel an attachment. I actually, the whole beanie thing is funny because like I used to wear a beanie on top of my hijab. So I used to have that was like my style of like, I wear the hijab, but I wear a beanie on top, and it's like a hijabi beanie thing. But then eventually I lost the hijab and I just wore the beanie, and then I lost the beanie. But it was a process, and like I felt safer wearing the beanie on top because it was almost like a punk emo thing, you know? Like it wasn't just wearing a hijab. It was like I'm making it my own style, you know?
But you referred to it again as being your safety hat or your safety net.
Right.
So, I mean, I wear a bindi every day, and everyone always asks me, are you married? And I'm like, no, I'm just, I wear it to protect myself. It's me, it's within, it's whatever I believe in.
It's what meaning you give to it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I can relate to it a lot, especially like regarding religion and everything. I was born and raised in a Christian Catholic family, but I don't follow Christianity or Catholicism. So yeah, I feel you in terms of like, you know, depression comes when you're, as you said, when you're acting, when you're performing something you don't fully believe in, you're just doing it to please your family, especially your family, and because you've been told to do that, so you think like, okay, I'm gonna do it, but you know inside you that there is something that's not right. It's like it's not really your path is different, and yeah, I know the feeling of being like, how can I say, I'm feeling a bit like the black sheep, not only with the religion but even with the culture, like myself.
And it's sometimes mixed. Religion and culture sometimes gets mixed up together as well.
Yeah, so that's why like every time I go back on holidays, it just feels like, sometimes I feel like my home doesn't feel home to me, but just because I feel like I'm expanding, I'm more than the place where I was born and raised.
Like you transcended that, like that, yeah.
And even London sometimes doesn't feel like home, because for me, like home is everywhere. It's not like a fixed place.
A citizen of the earth, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, and when you are born in these like conditions, like surrounded by religion and how a culture, you from that culture should look like and talk like and think like, and then you grow up and you're always surrounded by people from all over the world, you read a lot of books, you go out, you travel, you're like, no, it's actually more than this, and I should be free to choose what I want to believe and what like I want to identify as, and all of the
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. I think but I think there's a lot of like it takes a lot of confidence and courage to actually live the way that you want to live, and away from expectations. And I think I struggled with that for a long time, especially like people who are like people pleasers will just live in those chains for like years and years and years before they decide to like break free.
It's because you feel guilty. Like you feel guilty.
I felt very, very guilty. Even writing this piece, I felt guilty. Like there's a lot of guilt attached to expressions of faith and how you navigate that.
That's what I was going to ask. Was like when you were writing it, compared to, see, time heals as well, and you become something else. You write more poems. You become more confident. See, it's a process. So I'm just wondering, each poet takes something out from performing, from writing, from exposing themselves, being vulnerable. So I'm wondering, like, do you feel like you have a different kind of mindset, a different kind of outcome in life, a different kind of confidence? Has this poetry made you different in some sort of way, or do you still have these residual negative feelings?
Around faith.
Yeah, like how has
it changed?
Has it transformed you?
When I wrote this, I was still in between even being sort of honest and open with my family about like that I'm not going to wear it anymore. I was always wearing the beanie until I just stopped wearing it, and they noticed that I was on that path to stop it, like not wearing it, but I wasn't there yet. Now it's been like almost 3-4 years I haven't been wearing it, and now it almost feels normal, like for me not to wear it. But at that time it was completely different. It was like my family were like quite shocked, and you know it was a adjustment time. Now it's like I feel quite normal. But then, and for a long time I didn't put the hijab back on, but then, you know, over the summer I was in Istanbul with my family, and like, you know, wearing it in mosques, and like to be respectful in that sense. And I was worried about how it feels wearing it, but actually I felt really comfortable. So like when I wore it, I almost felt like, oh, this is still me. Like this is still a part of myself that I can celebrate. but I don't have to wear it all the time, and I can choose when I wear it. And if I go to a mosque and I'm observing the mosque and the practices there and the culture, I can do that, but it doesn't have to be, all the time.
You have a choice.
Yeah. And I think there's so much freedom in that choice, but I also really respect women that do wear it all the time and the women that choose to wear it, because for them, and for me when I was younger, like, to wear it was actually a liberation. Like, I was choosing to wear it as a symbol of my faith and as like a sort of sacrifice almost,
You got about like, is it 10 minutes? I love that you got like so many notebooks. Like, it makes me feel like I'm not writing enough.
I've only just finished. This took me ages to finish. Yeah, cool. This is more like something I'm trying. I've only performed it once. I don't really perform it. It's a bit more usually I write poetry, but this is more like a narrative type of, almost trying to do prose, kind of like a novel type of thing. But yeah, it's a short extract. And you'll kind of guess what it's about because I already just told you a second ago, like, similar things. Cool. All right, it's called Uniform. And there's a line in it that's in Arabic. Basically, when you're sort of going to the mosque, there's during prayer time, there's a person that calls people to prayer that does this call to prayer, and within the prayer they say, Hayya ala salah, hayya ala salah, hayya ala falah, hayya ala falah, which just means come to prayer, come to success, come to prayer, come to success. So there's just a line that's got that in it. Cool. Sticky floor, slouched beanie, mohawk galore, black skinny jeans, tattered, frayed at the seams, and a thick, glossy layer of black smothering eyelids, brick-heavy boots and zebra stripes, dull-lit rooms and flashing lights, rhythmic chants and melodic bass lines, band T-shirts and crowded frenzies, factory-made prototype world, shared visions and beliefs in a transcendent power, swaying and moving to its call. Sun-drenched paths and tropical green, flooding every inch of land the eye can see. Cotton shirts and sandal shoes, baggy pyjama greets the deluge. Monsoon rain on the rooftop, hiding from mosquitoes in the open air. 3 boys stand at the back of a truck. A man in a lungi rides a motorbike at dawn. At 11 o'clock, a tea stall is set up by the roadside. It is break time, and men can be seen flocking to the makeshift establishment, for tea and cigarette, barn and conversation, looking for gossip and fuel for another day's work. Their mothers and wives are adorned in patterned designs, embroidered cotton scarves and shalwar kameez flowing in the midday breeze. A loose dupatta hangs over the strands of hair, seen in braids or plaits or summer frizz. The scene is overlaid by the sound of the adhan, the call to prayer, echoing from a nearby minaret. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala salah. Bearded men in pristine white robes converge at the entrance of the masjid, the mosque. Hayya ala falah, hayya ala falah. A crowd forms, denting the surface with synchronized movements, following learnt motions, bowing and raising head and limbs. A loud cymbal sounds. Everyone is still. A gentle melody begins, reverberating from a single electric guitar. The swarm of people release a thunderous applause, nodding and gesticulating their excitement. Scanning the bodies, faces unrecognizable in the darkness, the souls populating this room. One can observe a baseline fact, that they have arrived at this venue in search of music and revelry, nostalgia and conversation, headbanging through the evening, looking for respite and purpose to face another day's work. Standing together, shoulder to shoulder, the men in white offer their blessings to the Most High, kneeling and bowing forehead to the ground in unison, they whisper sacred lines and point toward a holy land. They hold within them shared visions and beliefs in a transcendent power, moved by his call. There can be found among community, shared perspectives and identity, a deep sense of belonging and trust, common understanding of this dunya, this world, this reality, and a discernible uniformity. Being called to a place of joy and togetherness is part of the fabric of human life, a tender longing to feel a part of something greater than ourselves. It is this which drives us wherever we may be, from east to west, from land to sea, from cluttered temples to outdoor fields, from concert halls to prayer mats on the motorway, from sacred walls to basement rooms, from theatres and stadiums to towering structures built in the name of sacred scripture. There is a deep longing for connection, found among slouched beanies and dip-dyed hair, skinny black jeans and netted tights, shalwar kameez and flowing veils, baggy pyjamas and thick beards. It is all uniform. Thanks.
Again, with the imagery, like just like the flowing veils, the attention to detail is just something that I really appreciate in your writing. And like in terms of like, you know, the writing process and that piece, do you just have like an envision of a scene in your mind, or is it just drawing from memories of things you've experienced?
So I think I wrote that in Bangladesh, or just when I think I was in Bangladesh, or I'd just come back from Bangladesh. Okay. So I was around a lot of the imagery. Like it was sort of some of my observations being in Bangladesh in the summertime, and just things that I would see, like when we were driving, and I saw the tea stall, I saw the men coming with their cigarettes and the guys in their lungis. So a lot of it was from what I actually saw. And also just thinking about back in London, you know, going to like an emo gig or rave or whatever, like emo night. It was a thought that it emerged from a thought that I had when I was in a concert, and people were like banging their heads like this, and I was just watching the crowd, and I was just thinking they're in worship, right? It's like literally they're in worship, and it just I drew that parallel between praying in a mosque, you're wearing white, everyone's in white, they're all in that uniform, they're all in that same thing. And then when I go to these emo punk gigs, everyone's in black, like everyone. Like you're not original. Like you get there, you're in your black jeans, and you think, wow, like I've really like dressed for the part. Everyone's wearing exactly the same, like literally like it's a uniform. Yeah. They're all in band t-shirts, they're all in skinny jeans. That's literally it's like an emo starter kit, and like, and it's just the fact that in both settings there's almost a uniform, and like the community is the same, and people are doing the same thing because they believe in the same thing, and they're moved by this same power, right? But it's the same thing. You're in a concert praying, or like almost worshipping this music, and in that community, like just in that same moment, everyone's sharing that experience. In the same way, when you're in the mosque on a Friday, it's Friday prayers, everyone's praying, everyone's come there to do the same thing. So it's just the idea that those are almost for me like the two big communities that I feel connection to. And how they're so different, and people wouldn't necessarily connect the two, but for me it's like I can feel safe in both spaces, right? And I like to play with the idea of like, it is more like a scene in my head, like I sort of played with it a bit in terms of there's a confusion within the line where there's a break and like a crowd forms, and it's for the part where it's going to be the prayer, but then you hear a sound on the guitar. So I try to like mix the two of like, you can't tell which one it is, kind of. There's an ambiguity because they're both the same community, and it's in a way the same thing.
Like a weird dream.
Yeah.
It's almost like even taking away from the clothes and like the physical sort of what you can see, the actions behind what they're doing, and that's almost a form of uniform as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's really
You know what I find interesting? A moment ago, oh god, we were talking about Matrix.
Oh,
Yeah, and when she was reading, I was thinking, it's like she's watching, or she's a fly on the wall, and she can see exactly, she can see the code almost of both, and it looks exactly the same, but it's just it's two different spaces. Like it was interesting listening to it and kind of envisioning that. I mean, I didn't mean to add the Matrix to it, but it's like
I love the Matrix. Matrix is one of my
Matrix is
favorite
great.
things.
Yeah.
It's like cyberpunk,
That's
isn't it?
exactly
Yeah.
what I was thinking, but then I was thinking, like, in the Matrix, you know how Neo is trying to break out of that monotony of life? And then I'm just thinking, like, you feel safe in it, but do you feel like you want to break out of it or do something different? Or, like, do you feel like that's what you're doing now as your future self, kind of?
It's like I followed the
Breaking
rabbit to
out.
the emo gig.
Okay.
Alice spoke.
I followed the white rabbit. Yeah. No, I don't think it's. I don't feel like I'm breaking out of the matrix. I just feel like I'm on a journey, and I don't feel like either space has to be right or good, or either space has to be wrong or bad. Yeah, like they can both exist, and for me, it's like that duality exists within me, and so that comes out in my writing. Like there is a duality of like, I do feel comfortable in these gigs and these punk settings or whatever, but I also feel comfortable sometimes in the mosque and within the Muslim community. And both of those things are intrinsically part of my identity, I feel.
That's so interesting because those gigs are so haram. You know, and you're just like putting it together and like saying, yeah, I'm still Muslim, I'm still like halal, but you know, because it's just like all being uniform and just like being with the flow and the culture that you've been merging into.
Right.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I can take, and I can take what I like from each kind of thing. But interesting, like, the one thing I don't like about the emo gigs is, like, it's just full of white people only, and I'm always the only brown person there. Being emo, yeah, but, like, I'm literally, like, walking around, like, okay, I'm wearing the same clothes as everyone else,
You still feel like a minority.
but I'm still a minority even in that space, even though that's where I feel more belonging. Everyone's white.
And you're like the biggest punk out of all of them.
Yeah,
I can see that.
So that's a weird thing sometimes, but it's just normal. Like, as in, yeah, I just go to these gigs and like, I literally sometimes count how many people of color I see because it's like so few. When I see someone, I'm like, yo, like.
You give them the cultural nod, like us.
Like we're both South Asian, but we like rock music. Cool, like you know.
It's like when you go on holiday and you see other British, black or British Asians or something. It's like,
Connection.
there's some
You're here too.
melanated people. Look.
Can I just ask you a question? You see when you spoke about like so when you wrote it, you went to the emo club and you were standing back and you was watching everyone kind of do it. Do you think where you made that connection between people doing the same thing, do you feel like that made you feel less bad about, because you was in a transition, so you're going to this other side and you're not sure if it's right or wrong. Do you feel like when you found that out, that connection, do you feel like that kind of eased things for you to?
It was like this moment. I was like, oh my god, it's the same thing, but dressed in a different way. It's the same thing, but packaged differently, right? I almost felt like it was a blasphemous thought that I had. I was like, they're basically praying. I was like, wait, is that blasphemous? Like,
Okay.
it's like literally like they're like moshing, like they're like literally headbanging to like this screamo vocalist. I'm like, is this praying? Like, what, are they praying to the devil? Like, what's going on?
Like, their faith, right? Like they all pick up poison. So.
Yeah. I don't think it made me feel less bad. I think it just made me feel like, oh, like there can be a common thread, and it just made me feel like people are seeking the same. People are seeking the same thing in different ways. Everyone's seeking that belonging in that community in different ways, right? And it's exactly the same as the men in the masjid, the mosque. Like they're all wearing the white robes, they're all praying, they're all wearing the hats. All these emo kids, emo boys, got septum piercing, the beanie. They're all trying. Like everyone's just trying to find that belonging and their identity,
It's so interesting how like the punk movement like so against all them boundaries and rules, and it's like anarchy is like completely like disobeying it all and forgetting it all, but then they've naturally kind of come to that.
It made me feel like, so you had that question about the moment, it made me feel like I wish both camps could see what I'm seeing right now. Like those men at the masjid don't see any link or connection to these emo boys who are going to the punk gig, right? And vice versa. The punk people think, oh, Muslims or whatever, like, and it's this like complete disconnect. And if they had it, like, it's just funny to me because, you know, it's the same thing almost. Or there's similarities, and people don't see that. And people focus so much on their differences, they don't see that they're doing the same thing in different ways.
I can imagine a poetry video for it, where like there's a split screen. You've got the guy in prayer, kind of like, you know, bowing, and then also the thing with the guy in the mosh pit or whatever, just like headbanging, and then people obviously getting ready to go to mosque or to the gig, and they're like putting on like their clothes, like they're putting on the side by side, like one's putting on the I don't know what the name of the
like the duppy,
and then obviously they're putting the beanie, and then they're putting on their like black, I don't know, whatever, jean jacket or something, and they're putting on the robe. Like, yeah, I can see like just everything in unison, side by side.
Like, you've got the branding, you've got the vision, the creative vision for the music video.
That'd be so cool. Yeah, and I think that's a really cool point. Like, just
You should just do it.
It's just funny because like that's like a lot of my poetry, because I've got this like, my imagination's like very big, and like a lot of the pieces, the reason it's so much imagery is because it's just like all of these images are in my head, and I'm just trying to put them on a page or give them some kind of structure. But that's exactly how I imagined it when I was writing it. I was like thinking about these people getting ready, and they're like wearing their best clothes, right? Or like ironing their jeans or whatever. They're probably not ironing their jeans, but you know, whatever. Like, they're probably making it more grungy. But you know, they're both dressing for the part, right?
Yeah, and even like the ironing thing, like deliberately not ironing and just intentionally crumpling a t-shirt is another way of conforming, isn't it?
Right, exactly.
Even though to them it's rebellion.
Like Friday afternoon or Friday night. Like Friday is like sacred for different communities. Like Friday is sacred because Muslims go to the mosque, and it's sacred because emos go to the punk gig, or you know what I mean? Like whatever. It's like, oh, it's Friday. Like, what does that signify for you, right? But yeah.
Fish and chips.
I think also one of the things I would say is that I feel that your piece is just honouring both, because I do totally, I'm with you on the fact that there is commonality and you can see the same things, but also you don't actually have to see the same things. What you get, or what I hear in your poem, is I am honouring both of these spaces. So yes, there is that intentionality because of what you had, that moment of showing that there are same things going on here. There are people aiming for a spiritual connection or something other, and there are like commonalities. But for me, what rings out is I'm honouring both these spaces, because I think that we often want to compartmentalise things, or we want them to be linear, and life is not linear.
Exactly.
People are not linear, and actually in some ways we don't even have to get each other, but can we honour those spaces? And obviously because of your particular journey, and woven within that, it's about that sense of I can exist in both these spaces that's coming through, but that honouring of those spaces. And I think that is just something that comes through very strongly, and is for me a really key thing, because that sense, we don't have to get each other, but actually, you know what? Some people might get, oh, actually, this is kind of similar. But even if they don't, I think they will hear honour of both spaces.
Definitely. No, thank you for that. I totally agree. I think, like, I don't have to hate either one, or I don't have to feel like I can't exist in either space. And I think there's almost like a pressure to only exist in one. And I think that's what I struggle with. I think even some of my mental health was probably due to like this double life, or this double sort of duality within me, and like feeling like I can't do both. I have to do one, and that has to be the religious path, and it can't be this punk path or whatever. And like you're saying, like honouring both, and almost like internalizing both, and being able to exist with those two things.
Thank you so much.